Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Living a Graceful Life. I'm Tracy Gelb, your host this evening. I'm so extremely happy and honored to have Karen Hasselo on. She has just recently released a memoir and self-help. Um, would you, I want to call it the right word. Is it a book or is it a
Yes, a self-help book and guide.
self-help book and
Absolutely.
guide on helping as a mother through her journey of her life helping her special needs son. So I want you to tell us the exact name of the book and tell us, please, how everything happened.
Okay, thank you so much. I'm blessed to be here and I'm excited to be with you all. So, the book is actually called Climbing from Despair to Grace, an empowerment ladder for healing the hearts of mothers with special needs children. And it's basically the story of 27 years of my experience as a special needs mom. And the book opens on the day that my toddler son is diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder. And this was back in 1994, before the large epidemic of children that we now know are on the spectrum and exist around the world. When my son was diagnosed, it was only 4 in 10,000 children. And of course, I walked out of this large university center without any kind of actionable steps to take. The message was sort of like, go home and love him, which of course I was going to do. But I felt that more needed to be done than just loving him. And I entered into what's called ambiguous loss. And ambiguous loss happens when some of our parenting dreams are shattered. And that moment when a mom receives that original diagnosis, it just feels devastating. It feels insurmountable. And it takes us completely out of our comfort zone and throws us into this new world of new normal. And I certainly wasn't prepared for that new world. And the way that I felt I had to go about it was to get into the energy of trying to force the universe to give me a different kind of result. And I was very attached to my son being quote unquote fixed. And fixed meant that within 3 years or so, he was going to be indistinguishable from typical peers. So autism was going to be this experience that was going to be a blip on the screen of the past. I could wash my hands of it and never have to think about it again. And that's how I was coping with all of my pain and kind of suppressing the grief, because I was going to go into workhouse mode and make sure that I got this result. And of course, all of this comes out of the ego mind, because the ego
Mhm.
mind tries to control the outer reality so that I can feel safe on the inside. And the universe had a different idea about how things were going to unfold. But ambiguous loss happens because parts of our children are still there, but parts are missing. And then we're trying to recapture other parts. But there's all of this uncertainty. So we don't know what can be recaptured or what may never be recaptured. And so, according to Pauline Boss, who has done all the research on ambiguous loss, she
Mhm.
feels it's the most difficult loss because of all of the uncertainty, because there's never any real closure when a mom, or any caregiver for that matter,
Yeah.
is dealing with someone who, is not who they once were.
That's an interesting way of looking at it because I work in memory cares and assisted living. So I see a lot of caregivers, not to children, but to adults. And that's exactly what it is caring for somebody who is not what they once were. And I guess in a way, for you, it wasn't what he once was, but it was your hope of what he would be.
Absolutely, because before we have children, we start investing all of these hopes and dreams and aspirations and all these imaginings about how we think it's going to be. And of course, oftentimes that is an idealized version, whether you had a typical child or you have a special needs child, there's a tendency to over idealize, right, the experience. But for me, I really had to, through my journey, come to full acceptance of who my child was and what his divine plan was. Because what I know now is that, every child has a divine blueprint for their life. And that plan will unfold the way it's meant to. But of course, I believe our role is not to fix our children, but is rather to support them and to hold the highest vision on their behalf and to invite other people to get on board with that vision, to have other people get inspired. Because of course, it takes a team to help a special needs child. And it's also about holding space for the child to be who they are meant to be, not this version that the ego mind is demanding, like I navigated at the beginning of my journey so that I could feel safe, but rather allowing for what is meant to happen in the universe. But ambiguous loss is very challenging because one of the things that happens is it forces us to re-examine everything we've ever believed about ourselves and about life in general. Of course, most of us understand by adulthood that life isn't fair and that bad things happen to good people and that innocent children even experience harm, right? We know these things intellectually, but it was a whole different ballgame for me when I started living it every day. And I started having the experience of the injustice and that salt poured into my wound, because our children do confront a lot of injustice. They're not accepted for who they are. They're not seen for who they are. And they're not offered the supports that they deserve. And they're not offered equal opportunities. And so as you're moving through these experiences and you're watching your children struggle and sometimes even suffer, it triggers all of this re-examination. And for me, I ended up very stuck. I went into the dark night of the soul because I felt like life didn't make sense. Things were just haphazard. It was nonsensical. It was chaos. And I felt disconnected from a loving, organizing intelligence. And I was actually stuck there for like 10 years. So I understand how people can get stuck. And yet I know now that being stuck was part of the journey because it led me to actually becoming awakened to the truth of who I am, and then becoming awakened to the truth of who my child is. And that's a whole different way of moving through life. Rather than being in the victim mindset that life is happening to me, it's a recognition that actually life is happening for me. And
Yes.
that everything is a gift, but it's not always apparent at the time, right? Especially when there's all of this pain and loss and grief and sorrow and disappointment and frustration. And as humans, having the human experience, of course, and the mother experience, those things do need to be acknowledged. They do need to be processed. They do need to be released. But there's this higher perspective too. But
Yeah.
before I could tap into that, lots of things in my life had to be dismantled, because ambiguous loss will remove things out of your life that are not built on a solid foundation. And that's what happened for me. I went through divorce. I went through chronic illness. I went through the loss of long-term friends. I went through the loss of my career, lots of losses that all happened within a short window of time. And of course, as special needs moms, we're busy. We're pushing a boulder up a mountain every day. So it's tough to like take this time to actually process your sorrow and to give yourself permission to look at your own needs, because you're so busy just trying to put out fires. So it is a challenge, and it definitely is a juggling act, and there's definitely a process trying to find that middle path. And
Yeah.
because I was somebody who was always feeding the energy of the extremes, it took me a long time to find that middle balance point.
So I think, what we spoke about before the show started, what I like and respect everything, and I didn't even know some of these things. I had said I started reading the book, which is outstanding, outstanding, and I've been having slight trouble with my eyes, so as I'm gonna, believe me, read the rest of it, but I'm waiting for the audiobook as well. But what I noticed, and I wrote down a couple things. I thought about, I'd spoken to you briefly about me wanting to be a mom all my life, and thinking about, I can't even imagine what it would have been like for this type of thing to happen. It's almost like your worst nightmare in any scenario, whether you're a young mother or mother in your 40s, or whatever the case may be. But I remember something that stuck out with me when they told you, the diagnosis, like, just make it fun. Like,
Yes.
just, make it fun. How is that even so that stuck out with me.
Yes, that was actually the day after the diagnosis. My son was scheduled to see the speech therapist. And I, again, was trying to overcompensate because I had a lot of my own childhood wounds. And I didn't have a good connection with my own mother. So I was trying to be the perfect mother, and my ego was pushing me to keep that appointment when it really would have been a good idea to stay home and actually nurture myself and treat myself with compassion and say, you know what, it's okay to take a day off after you've received this shocking, devastating blow. But no, my ego was forcing me to keep the appointment. So I got in the appointment with him, and it was a play therapy appointment. And the speech language therapist was telling me that I should basically be relieved that I had this confirmation of the diagnosis, and that there was no room for me to be sad, and that I needed to be very playful and upbeat and spontaneous and keep it fun. And, he could pick up on my emotions, and this wasn't good for him, which I agree. He could pick up on my emotions. However, it wasn't even 24 hours. And, this again was an experience. Sometimes other people can't put themselves in our shoes, and they mean well, and they're very well intended, but they're not understanding exactly the emotional state we're in, as well as, what I was facing in that moment, which is, a great deal of overwhelm and not having a definite plan as to how I was actually going to assist my son.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we spoke about as well other things that have happened and the challenges, and you've certainly had many, but look at the gift that you have now to give to the world by writing this book, this memoir, and
Yes.
this self-help. And you said that, which I love, you said you got your son's permission and acceptance to do this.
Yes, yes. And he has been my greatest teacher. And I feel that most of the time our children are our greatest teachers. Our children are our spiritual equals, and they are very powerful, magnificent beings if they've chosen an incarnation where they're going to have special needs, because this is a challenging set of experiences to take on. And my son not only took on the experience of autism, but he took on a massive amount of health conditions, as well as the condition of bipolar. So by the time he was 7 years old, he had already made a suicide attempt, and he was months away from ending up in his first psychiatric hospitalization. And of course, I was in fix-it mode, right? So I'm going to fix autism, but now here comes bipolar to slap us in the face. And that was actually an even more challenging condition for him and for me, because he was hypersensitive to everything. He had great difficulty tolerating medication. He was not a great candidate for psychotherapy because of all of his language issues. He was very concrete. He was not highly motivated. He had great difficulty with coping mechanisms. And of course, when I say not highly motivated, that was a brain problem. You know, it's coming from the way his brain was set up. So it was very, very challenging. And it seemed like I would barely get on top of one diagnosis, and then there would be another one. And through most of his life, about every 18 months, there was a new diagnosis to digest and integrate. But so again, he's a very powerful being, right, to take all of this on. And it's recognizing that my belief is our children are actually working in tandem with us for our healing, because they're helping us release our limiting beliefs, our unbalanced behaviors, all of the things that stand in the way of us being the most powerful version of ourselves. And so as they're mirroring for us all of these aspects that need healing, and we're able to focus upon our own healing journey, then we can hold the sacred space for them to reach their highest potential. So it's our hearts are synergistically working in tandem for the highest good of both parties, as well as the highest good of Mother Earth and everyone on the planet, because we're all connected, right? So everything is energy and everything is connected. But of course, at the beginning of my journey, I didn't know these things and I didn't understand these things. And it was a process to be able to start looking at things with my spiritual eyes, looking at things from a higher perspective. Because when you look from the higher perspective, everything truly is a gift and everything truly is love. But the mind, of course, wants to take us into the fear and all of the broadcasting about the future and the catastrophic things that may happen, most of which never happen. But it's easy to get into that when you're dealing with ambiguous loss, because ambiguous loss is very similar to PTSD. The types of symptoms are similar, like psychic numbing, distressing dreams, anxiety, depression, and the loss of our identities, because our world kind of narrows down sometimes to this one thing, just being a caregiver. And all of a sudden I look in the mirror and I don't even recognize myself. It's like, who's this woman? And she doesn't look very vibrant right now. She looks pretty dimmed. And so it was like a process of walking myself back home to who I truly am, and no longer giving my power away to all these temporary realities and all of these temporary diagnoses, because that's not the truth of who my son is. And me getting caught up in the mind and everything that's attached to that isn't the truth of our life, and it's not serving me. So perception is everything, right, in life.
Yes.
And when I shift my perception, then I access the miracles, the synchronicities. I become a receiver for all of the goodness in the universe and the help and I'm tapping into my higher knowing. So instead of getting lost in all of this trial and error that the mind is forcing upon me, that is wasted energy often, when I am tapping into my higher knowing, then solutions are flowing in and life becomes a path of much more ease rather than being in all the resistance.
Yeah, I mean, everything you're saying is, and we don't even know each other. I mean, I'm on a journey with my mom as an adult child living back at home, and we both truly feel that this is the most healing that we've ever done together. And as we're helping each other see each other, who we are. Like she's helping
Yes.
me see who I am. I'm helping her see who she is. And it happened through grief, through losing my sister 6.5 years ago, that we had this experience. I wouldn't change it. The only thing I would change, of course, is, what happened with my sister. But this is the first time that I know my mom and she knows me. And
Yes.
the universe provided this opportunity for us, and it's healing both of us. It's making us really see the gift that we have, the gifts that through everything, and we've both been through them. I mean, I could have 2 shows in a row on what we've been through, as have you, as have so many other people, everybody. But it's the healing that's taking place, and it's things like you writing the book and being there, being there, interviewing your son, seeing these miracles happen that are making it, and not only that, but giving the gift of purpose to be able to. There's so many people that have special needs children that are thinking, how am I going to do this? How does this even happen? And you're making it possible.
Exactly. And what I really want moms to know is even when it seems very, very dark, and even when it seems hopeless, because I went through a lot of that. In fact, almost exactly to the day, 12 years after my son was diagnosed originally with autism, I had to make one of the hardest decisions I've ever made in my life. And that decision was to actually place him in a residential treatment center because things were so dark at that point. He was going down a very dark road, and so was I. And it got to the point where I had to choose my own self-preservation because I had not been choosing that all along. Now, had I been choosing that all along, this likelihood could have been avoided. But since I didn't, I had to make this heart-wrenching decision. And it was so heart-wrenching because I knew that there was a high risk that he might not survive because he was in such a dark place. And I knew that he would feel abandoned. And I knew that it would break his spirit. And so it was absolutely gut-wrenching. And driving away from there with him screaming, mom, come back, mom, come back, mom, come back. And I had to literally wrench his hands from around my neck, turn my back to him, walk out, get in my car like an automaton and drive home and walk into this house that was so quiet and so empty because, he had the energy of 10 children. And it was literally like walking into a crypt. And the amount of loss that I felt and the amount of fear that I felt, but I knew that I had to make that choice. And thankfully he survived. And that was through the grace of God, because God actually provided some things for him there that kept him going. But the whole first year that he was there, he refused treatment. He was not on board with the treatment. And it was very scary. It was very difficult for me to detach myself and let go and trust that somehow this was going to work for the highest good, because for the most part, he was warehoused. However, after 12 months, there was a turning point. There were 3 events that happened, and it gave him the wake-up call that he needed. And he decided that he was actually going to take a look at himself, and he was going to make some changes. And when he came out of that facility at age 15, ever since that point, although we've had dips down, but we've been on an upward trajectory. So I want people to know that even if they feel like there isn't any hope and that things don't look promising, things absolutely can turn around. Because my son's in a really good place now. He's 30. He became an actor. He got a job. He is very creative. He's been in a film. He creates films. He's a very compassionate person today. He's a thoughtful person. He's a good person. He's got good integrity. And so his illness isn't running his life anymore, the bipolar illness. He's stable now. He hasn't had a manic episode in 8 years. The brain really does start maturing and becoming a different brain at about age 25, 26. So it's really important not to give up and to hold that vision for your child and for yourself, even when the vision feels really far away, even when you can't see how it's going to happen. But just holding the faith and the hope, because we don't have to know the how. The universe will deliver the how to us. But we stay in allowance. We stay in surrender. And that's not easy. Believe me, I can still go into resistance. My ego can still want to take the wheel. But I'm in a place where I recognize it quicker, and I'm able to thank my ego. Thank you for warning me. Thank you for communicating with me. But I've got this, and you can relax and sit in the back seat now.
It's amazing. It's amazing. And it's good. It's what people need to hear. Everyone I know knows somebody or has somebody in their life with special needs, a special needs mom. I want to know so we can tell people how to get this amazing book that you have just.
Oh, well, thank you. It's on Amazon. So you can just head over to Amazon, and it is on my author page. So you can just look it up under my name, Karen Hasselo, Hasselo, or look up the title, which is Climbing from Despair to Grace. You can also order it from my website if you'd like. If you want an author signed, personalized book, you can go to my website, which is www.spiritfirstcoaching.com. And if anybody wants to connect with me, that's my business page on Facebook, Spirit First Coaching. And I also have a private group for moms, which is called Empowerment for Special Needs Mothers. And that's a group that I'm really looking to build, because I really want moms to have a safe space where they can be with other moms and share their experiences and feel heard and feel understood, but also receive empowerment tools so that they can really be the best version of themselves. Because our kids want us to be happy. They want us to be thriving. They don't want us to be in this martyrdom energy, which is the energy I was in. And unfortunately, because I was in that energy, my son ended up feeling like he was a burden. And that wasn't my intention. I didn't want him to feel like a burden. I didn't want him to feel like he wasn't enough. But when you're in this constant fix-it energy, your child feels like they're not enough. And
Yeah.
What's different about healing versus fixing is healing is the energy of knowing that your child is already exactly who they're meant to be in this moment. And the only thing we're here to do is remove the barriers. So we allow them to be able to reach their fullest potential.
That's beautiful, and I think it's perfect. And at that note, I can't even believe how fast this went.
Yeah,
I
it
just
flew.
It flew. I want to thank you so much. Thank you for the beautiful book and for your wisdom, and thank you for being here with us this evening.
Thank
I
you so
appreciate
much, Tracy.
you. Welcome. Thank you again.